Well, welcome everybody into the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West as we get you ready for week number 2. Yes, week number 2 of college football as LSU gets set to host Nicholls. And Glen, today's podcast, we're going to preview the game, but really, and look, this is no disrespect to the opponent by any means, but there's a lot of things LSU needs to figure out after the week 1 performance. Obviously, some of the biggest news: John Emery Jr. not going to be available. Figuring out what kind of role Caden Durham could have going forward. Tons of different storylines, Glenn. So while obviously the result matters, this is a game where you need to really figure out one, who you are, what roles can be defined, and two, take care of business and get ready for SEC play next week.
Yeah, I do think that there's a sense in this game that anything we look at or find scheme wise, I'm not sure you can learn too much. Like if LSU, for example, goes down and scores 7 touchdowns on 7 drives, that's great, but it's what's expected. Like they have to come out here and assert their dominance in this game, assert their will. And there are a few things that I'm going to be looking at in that respect. I mean, I do think that having some red zone efficiency when you get into those situations is going to be very important to get 7 and not settle for 3 or 0 if LSU gets a little aggressive. They have to finish with 7 points. They have to stay ahead of the chains. I think they should have really no problem moving the ball up and down the field in this game, but just play really solid football from a scheme standpoint, get a number of guys involved. I mean, that'll be another one of our keys to the game as we get closer to Saturday with our preview and predictions. Just get a number of these younger pieces involved, especially in the secondary. I think there's a number of guys you could point to, whether it's Deshaun Spears, PJ Woodland, maybe a Javian Toviano at the star. Just a couple of guys that I feel like LSU could look at and give some extended series and reps to without really having to lean so heavily on your starters and kind of save a lot of their legs for the game against South Carolina next week. So there's a number of different storylines that we can tackle here, but I think probably from just a way that you watch this game and like from a viewing standpoint, playing disciplined football is what I really want to see most of all. I mean, Brian Kelly talked about it on Sunday. Those penalties that they had, the self-inflicted wounds that they had against USC, those can't stand, and those can't be something that that becomes a trend with this team. Like you've got to be able to have some more focus and not be costing yourself yards, costing yourself field position, and ultimately points, because there were a couple of those penalties there where USC was able to take advantage of field position and go down and score, get some points on the board. And we talked about it last week, but LSU is going to be playing in a lot of tight games this year. I firmly believe that. And so if you make it a trend or a kind of a weekly or biweekly basis that you're getting hit with these 15-yard penalties or for reasons that are outside of the on-field football game, then I think you're in real trouble if you're LSU. So going out there and proving that you can have that discipline and be in control of your actions, I think is going to be a part that shouldn't be overlooked, because if you can't do it against Nicholls, you're not going to be able to do it later in the season in some of these higher stakes games. So that would be something that I think, just in terms of watching and from a bystander standpoint, that I think I'd like to see LSU kind of accomplish this weekend.
Yeah, staying with that theme, Glenn, of just the kind of 30,000-foot view of what I want to see, and we'll get into maybe offensively and defensively specific things. Brian Kelly mentioned and kind of maybe made a joke out of, he doesn't know how much you really get out of 73-0 beatdowns in week 1. We saw obviously what Ole Miss did. We saw what Auburn did. And look, those do a lot for the fan base. They pump them up. They give them a lot of confidence. But Glenn, I will say there is a part of me that on Saturday wants to see this team dominate, because if we are going to talk about this team as a team that could be a playoff contender, even with that loss, dominating lesser competition, that's what playoff caliber teams do. And so I don't know how much you really go into it. Is it a specific score, anything like that? I think it's more of just total domination, take care of business, never a doubt. Like you mentioned, no boneheaded plays, no mistakes, no self-inflicted mistakes. Go take care of business, win the football game. play lights out on both sides, balanced, complementary football, like Brian Kelly talked about, and christen the 100th year of Tiger Stadium and that debut here in 2024 with a big win. I mean, numbers wise, I don't really care what the box score looks like. I just want to see a clean, balanced effort that is totally dominant. I think that would be the biggest thing to take away. And we'll get into specific sides of football, but I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer that we have to sit here after a week, a week after the game one, and it's another loss that we're talking about, or another loss that's hanging over the heads of a lot of fans and certainly the program right now. But at the end of the day, this is still a team that's ranked 18th in the country. They still
Yeah.
have all their goals in front of them that they can still accomplish. But there's certainly a lot of work that has to be done on both sides of the ball. So this week, you're not going to learn a whole lot about the on-field product, right? I mean, I think you're going to have to wait until you get to South Carolina, to UCLA, and really kind of see where you're at after those 2 weeks from a scheme standpoint, from a just situational standpoint in terms of third down and red zone, because LSU, like we mentioned, should have no problem moving the ball up and down the field on offense. They should have not many problems stopping Nicholls on offense. I mean, as much as people want to tear apart the defense and all that, I mean, this is a secondary that should be able to hold its own. I mean, Nicholls completed 10 passes last week against Louisiana Tech, and they had maybe 130 or so yards through the air last week. They just are not a very prolific, dynamic offense in that respect at the FCS level. So we gotta. I mean, if LSU's out there, you gotta get them behind the chains, stop them pretty consistently, and really not let them move the ball up and down the field on you. That would be a big win for me in terms of just or not a big win, but just a minor win in terms of learning how this team can kind of grow from week to week. And Brian, it was another thing that Brian Kelly talked about. You see the biggest improvement in your team from week 1 to week 2 of a season. And I think having played USC, who is a top 15 caliber team, a team that's going to be now vying for the college football playoff themselves, you do learn a little bit more about your team than as opposed to beating some breaks off some team 73-0. But I think at the end of the day, you still have a team here that's got a lot of work to do, and I think now they have an understanding, or at least they should have a better understanding of what needs to be accomplished here over the next month or so before you go into your next big gauntlet of a game in Ole Miss, because I do think that is going to be right up there with some of the more important ones that Brian Kelly has had in his early tenure here.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. All right, let's take a look at this. Obviously, different preview episode, but Glenn and I are going to give maybe 1 or 2 things on both sides of the football that we are looking out for. So, Glenn, let's start with that offense, which I think if we would have told ourselves even just a couple of weeks ago that we might have more concern or question or maybe just confusion about the offensive side of the football, then it would have been surprising. I don't know if we would have put money on that. So what's something offensively that you want to see happen on Saturday? I know, like we said, we understand the situation, but something that would walk away making you feel like, okay, there's a path to some of the questions being answered when the competition comes back up.
Yeah, I mentioned it off the offset, but I'm going to stick with the red zone efficiency, scoring touchdowns instead of settling for field goals or getting no points when you get into when the field kind of tightens. I would love to see kind of LSU really assert their will, assert their dominance on this team in that respect. And how do you go about doing that? You find good balance between the run and the pass. You're able to hit your electric playmakers in the end zone, like that Kyron Lacey touchdown that you hit in the first half of that game on Sunday, which was a beautiful hookup from Nussmeier to Lacey. I would like to see them get those guys more involved in the red zone this weekend. Get those yards, get those stats, get those receptions up quite a bit, and just kind of have a fun field day out there offensively. I think would be a great start. And I'm kind of leaving the door open for you to kind of take the run game answer to this question, but certainly balancing it with the run and seeing kind of how Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams, and now Caden Durham can bounce back from last week and see if they can't get this thing back on a more consistent track. But I'll leave that up to you, because I do think that's something we should talk about.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just kind of take that and run with it here. I mean, I think a lot of people, including myself, were intrigued, or our interest was piqued when we looked at the box score and we saw 7 total touches for Caleb Jackson, 6 carries, and just 1 reception. How does that figure into the plans? What we saw in fall camp, where Glenn, I mean, it's no secret. We saw a lot of Caleb Jackson, during fall camp in the 11 on 11, the 7 on 7, in a lot of different areas. Josh Williams, I mean, look, at this point in his career, we know what Josh Williams is. I think he is a high level pass protector and blocker. He understands the game so well, and he's going to offer you things in spurts. Like, he's going to be a guy that he might get hot, for a drive or two and really start to feel himself. But this feels like it should be Caleb Jackson's, receiving maybe a lot of the carries and emerging as that threat. And then, I mean, the biggest storyline that I didn't know we were going to have to talk about, but it's Caden Durham, and how do you utilize him? Because, I was just on a show earlier today, and I mentioned this. I said, I think the goal should be, before you take the field next week at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina, you have to hope that Caden Durham will have seen, at least on a base level, about everything there is to see as a freshman running back. We had this conversation about Caleb Jackson last year, understanding blocking schemes, alignment, all of these different things that are outside of what he does best, and that's having the football in his hands and making guys miss. But his ability to, maybe, look, it's third, fourth quarter, maybe the score is 45-10, I don't know what it is. I'm going to be watching that. Like, is Caden Durham, his comfortability, so when he gets out on the field, because right now he's going to have to, at some point in a meaningful football game, when he gets out there, can he rely on, hey, I know the competition level has taken a jump up, but I've seen this. I understand when Nuss makes that call to switch me from his right to his left. I understand what I'm now doing. It's just those small nuanced things that we talked a lot about, Caleb Jackson needing to make that leap from year 1 to year 2. Now, Caden Durham's going to be asked to make that. Hey, we know you got here in the summer, your fall camp. Now you're going to have to be able to kind of understand and maybe drink from the fire hose a little bit, because we do need you in this game and for this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. And I think when I look at this game, I can think back to last year at this time and the usage that Caleb Jackson had in the second week against Grambling. He had 11 carries for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns in that blowout win against Grambling. It was kind of his first big taste of getting meaningful snaps at the college level. And he was able to parlay that into a pretty complimentary piece the next week against Mississippi State. We had, I think, a couple catches. He had 6 or 7 carries. And obviously he had that one blow up on the sidelines there where he just completely trucked a Mississippi State defensive back. And I think pretty much all of LSU fandom fell in love with him right then and there on that one play. So I think there's an opportunity here for Caden Durham to get 7, 8, 9 touches, especially in the second half of this game. I want to see him a little bit with the first team, and we'll see kind of how they parlay and parcel up those touches. But this is an opportunity for him to get a good look and several good reps here, because I do think you're going to need him next week against South Carolina. You're going to need him for the rest of the season. You don't have 8 scholarship backs like you did last year. You're down to 3. And running back is one of those positions where you can never ever count out the injury bug, and because of just how physical and how taxing it is on the body. They've got to be able to balance, I think, over in particular the next couple of weeks of not extending Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson too far by using by using Caden Durham, and by using maybe a Malachi Lane, who's a walk-on, who I think is somebody that you could also see in the second half of this game get a few touches and kind of just help run the clock out and kind of save those legs of Jackson and Williams, because you're very thin at that position right now. It's obviously something you've got to lean into to have a more balanced offense with what Nussmeier brings in this passing offense. Like we've mentioned before, you don't have Jaden Daniels back there anymore to kind of help you save some games where you struggle to get the run game off the ground. You've got to lean into these guys. And I think a big part of that, once we get into the meat of the schedule here, is that they have fresh legs. And I think right now the best way you can go about making sure this whole room has fresh legs is by balancing out the touches, getting Caden Durham involved. Hopefully they're getting him up to speed here pretty quickly. He did not see the field much, I think, at all against USC. So making sure that he's ready to go, I think, is going to be of utmost importance for this offense and really over the next couple weeks before they get into kind of the meat of their SEC schedule.
And obviously, a lot of that goes to the offensive line as well. We don't really have to dive into it, but hey, here's an opportunity to dominate an opponent. And
Yeah, we've talked about it.
yeah,
They
yeah,
absolutely have to respond this week. They took a lot on the chin, from the fan base, from us, the media. Uh, this is a group that came into the year with a lot of pride, and I think they got hit in the nose a little bit.
yeah,
They got put in check a little bit, as to say. So, how those guys respond in the run game will be very important. I think they should have no problems against Nicholls. If they have problems against Nicholls in the run game, then we have a very concerning kind of trend going forward
yeah.
here. But we know what they can do as pass blockers, and they should handle their business in the run game this weekend too.
Talk defense now, where Glenn, I mean, I think you and I've maintained it. This defense did about, aside from penalties, did about as well as you could have hoped. And people like to move the goalpost back when they judge teams. I think when you look back at that game, hey, if you'd have told me LSU was going to give up 10 first half points to a Lincoln Riley offense, 27 total, I said, hey, there's a good chance you're going to win this football game. Result didn't go the way they wanted. But want to get
13
your
through three
thoughts.
quarters. They had
Yeah,
13 points through three quarters. Like, you were
exactly.
in
Like, this
position to win that
defense
game.
did what they needed to do to put you in a position to win the game. We all know that. But on Saturday, you have an opportunity, and you wrote about this and wanted to give you kind of an opportunity to kind of flesh that out even more. It's a chance for young guys. It's a chance, and particularly for two young safeties, it feels like, and you kind of talked about this. Deshaun Spears, Kylan Jackson, maybe even Javian Toviano in that defensive backfield to really, I don't want to say win a job right out, but to push for some serious consideration of, hey, maybe there should be an opportunity for someone else to start. We saw what Jordan Gilbert was there in week one. We saw Jordan Allen. I didn't think Jordan Allen played bad in week one, but it's a chance for young guys to get their feet wet and a proving ground of, hey, maybe I do need some more snaps when we go into South Carolina, we play UCLA, and we get into that, obviously, that big game against Ole Miss in October.
Yeah, I'll throw in PJ Woodland at cornerback in that mix as well. I think Woodland had about 8 or 9 snaps at cornerback. Spears had the final 2 plays of the game, with Gilbert kind of out, or getting knocked out for the targeting. He was in there for 2 plays. So if that is kind of the role that they have this weekend, something's gone seriously wrong. I mean, we've talked to Brian Kelly this week already, and he says that both of those guys are going to be in for some bigger roles. He mentioned Kylan Jackson as well as a guy who's going to get a lot more snaps at safety this weekend, next to Jordan Allen. And I'm really excited for a guy like Spears in particular, because, I
Yeah.
mean, we've been talking about him on this show. Everybody really around LSU media has been talking about him as kind of that guy that when you just watch him in fall camp and practice, he just looks the part. He looks like he's a guy that's going to be able to come in and make some things happen for you in the deep part of the field. He's long, he's athletic, he can move well. And he's, I think, somebody that's going to be able to come up to the line of scrimmage when they need him to, and make some plays in the backfield. He's got that length and that size to be able to break into the backfield on occasion and make some plays back there. So he's somebody that I'm really going to be focusing in on here against Nicholls, because you're right, you're not going to get. Okay, Deshaun Spears goes out there and has an interception and 6 or 7 tackles, and he's ready to be a starter against Alabama in November. No, you're not going
Yeah.
to get that kind of thing. But I do think that it starts to churn the wheels a little bit of this coaching staff of like, okay, we can put him out there in some more high leverage games and some more high leverage snaps, instead of having to wait until somebody goes down with an injury or somebody gets
Yeah.
ejected, kind of thing. Like, you can mix those guys in more and more. And look, I totally see why they went the veteran route in game 1 against USC. It's very hard to know what freshmen are going to be like in their first games. And you always kind of lean towards the veteran guys who have had the experience, who have played in these games before. It certainly, for lack of better words, it burned them a little bit in that
Yeah.
game against USC with some of the mistakes that were made by some of those vets. So I think it's a great opportunity here this weekend against an opponent that you should be able to handle from start to finish, to get these guys some reps and kind of get the feel of what a night game in Tiger Stadium is like, because you're going to be playing some very high leverage opponents in there later this year, whether it's Alabama or Ole Miss or Oklahoma to end the season. So getting those guys those reps now, I think, is extremely important. I would venture to say that Woodland gets a ton of looks, opposite of Stamps, and you'll see Sage Ryan, you'll see Jair Brown. I think you'll see J.K. Johnson mix in there as well. But I'd really like to see Woodland and Spears in particular get a lot more reps. And then at the star position, I would not be surprised if we see more Javian Toviano. I mean, I don't think this staff is out on him from a game perspective. Like, I think they like his game. They like what he could potentially do for this staff, for this team. I think it's just really coming down to, okay, are we going to have this guy in November, December, or do we really want to throw him out if something here happens with the legal situation that he's involved in? So I don't want to speculate too much further than that, other than as to why he's not getting some more reps. But I would think if he sees the field more often this weekend, Toviano is a guy that I could see carving out a role in this secondary somewhere, whether it's at safety, whether it's at star, or whether it's at cornerback, because I do think that he has some range here to where he could be a pretty valuable piece in the secondary.
All right, let's end it here with the front seven, which kind of we get to combine with Glenn. I was kind of impressed with the defensive line. I said the other day to somebody, I said they played ticked off. Their own media kind of had big queries, big questions. We saw throughout fall camp the intensity in which they played with. And I would say for the most part, they responded that, it doesn't, they don't have to be, and this defensive line for LSU does not have to be a glaring weakness for this team. They can provide some restriction and some just overall toughness when it comes to opposing offenses. Want to get your thoughts on the front seven as a whole, the utilization of Harold Perkins, and how much can you really take away in a game where Perkins is probably going to be the best athlete on the field. You expect him to go in there and get double-digit tackles, maybe a couple sacks. I mean, this is a game where this is a stat padding game potentially for him.
Yeah.
How much can you really take away? Do you want to see anything specific with those linebackers and just the front seven as a whole with that defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd like to see them obviously get into the backfield with some relative consistency. Put Nicholls in a position where they're in second and long, third and long situations because of sacks or tackles for loss, or just the linebackers and the defensive tackles fitting the run well, those kinds of things. But I don't know how much the first team's going to play. I would imagine that they rotate a bunch, with some of these younger guys. I would love to see Dominic McKinley get some reps in this game. I'd love to see Mod Bro get some added reps in this game as well. So we'll see kind of what happens there. But I think defensively, look, last week they were pretty solid overall. I think the one area where you could nitpick a little bit is the explosive plays. And they gave up 12 long explosive plays in the passing game. They gave up 3 in the run game that went for over, I believe, 15 yards. So that's a good chunk of USC's success coming on plays that were 15, 20 yards or more. So I would love to see LSU kind of hold Nicholls to maybe 1 or 2 of those if they're lucky in this game. I think that would show that LSU kind of did their job in that respect. I don't think that if they get more than that throughout the course of the game, that you can really say that it was a job well done. I really do think you got to go out there and just annihilate this team as much as possible. And you don't like to say that because Nicholls is an in-state school, and I'm sure they got a very passionate fan base down there in Thibodaux. But for LSU and this team coming off another loss of that nature, you want to see them go out and control this thing from start to finish on both lines of scrimmage. And I think a big part of that will be limiting the explosive plays, getting them behind the chains, and really getting off the field, because they were able to do that last week. 3 of 9 for USC on third downs last week. I thought that was a bright spot for LSU in this game against USC, proving that they could get off the field. And I think you got to go out there and show that you do that again against a team like Nicholls.
I agree with you. It's going to be interesting. And for all the latest coverage and the best coverage, check out Go 24/7 linked.
We're not doing
below.
predictions. We're not doing
predictions. Oh, yeah.
Well, score predictions.
See, I guess I'm just disrespecting Nicholls. Apology to the people of Thibodaux, Louisiana.
What's Bryce Koon's prediction here for this game on Saturday?
Would you rather have mine, or you want me to get my daughter on screen? Because she's 1-1 so far this year. So we'll see.
She's 1-1. Yeah, that's right. She did go LSU. She did go
Yeah.
LSU last week. That's tough, Addy. That's tough.
That's tough. I'm gonna go. I need to see LSU dominate. I want to see them break the 50-point mark. I'm gonna go a final score 52-10. 10. That's going to be my final score.
Okay.
LSU wins
Yeah,
52-10.
I put 58-7 on our preview and predictions. Like I think you can allow a late score with some of those kind of second, third teamers in there, and you walk away still feeling really good about yourself. Don't think LSU can give up 14, 21 points to Nicholls and think that was a successful night defensively, just because of kind of where they're at and how much they have to win this game. And just kind of the importance of showing that they can win it in a dominating fashion. So that would be my prediction, 58-7. Would like to see Caden Durham maybe get in the end zone. Like to see a couple of these freshmen get some passes thrown to them. Treyez Green, I could see him having a nice catch or two in this game. Kamorian Pimpton, like to see him get a little bit more involved. And I think this is going to be a big night for a lot of the young players to kind of get their feet wet in the college game. So this is that from that respect, it's a lot of interesting stories can happen because we've followed these guys for a couple of years now in high school, and now they're getting their first kind of significant reps, or should be getting their significant reps on the field in Tiger Stadium for the first time. So it should be pretty exciting.
Also, a chance for fans. Make sure you stay to the fourth quarter because you're going to get a chance to watch Tiger Stadium and the new lights and the new sound system and the new video board, which is going to be a lot of fun just to kind of experience and have throughout the season. And obviously, LSU will unveil that on Saturday night. And Glenn, also, too, man, I was looking, the weather is supposed to be amazing. Like some of the best weather you could ask for September. It's supposed to be like 83 degrees at kickoff.
I'll knock on wood on that one because we're in a torrential downpour here in Baton Rouge the last couple days.
It's pretty rough right now in Baton Rouge.
Hopefully it rolls out of there by Saturday night. So
so we'll see. But hey, it's Glen West, Bryce Koon here on the Go 24/7 podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the video, and if you're listening, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get those, make sure to follow us on that feed and share with your friends. We'll be talking LSU all week and all the time over on Go 24/7. You can click that link down below for the latest news, recruiting, basketball, football, baseball, everything you want to know about your LSU Tigers and a great community as well. We'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.